not necessarily having to be completely JMU focused, because I think that's going to help with everything as you're trying to navigate this whole process. We were going to have someone in financial aid actually come and talk, but they're on a retreat right now. But my background, I used to work about 7 years in financial aid, and I also worked 20 years in the regular admissions office. I know this process pretty well, so you should be in pretty good hands for any questions that you have. I am Adam Anderson. I'm the Director of Recruitment for the College of Visual Performing Arts. But I'm glad to have you all here, and we'll talk through some of the different points on how this whole financial aid process works. So to start off, really the only application that you need to fill out for JMU is the FAFSA form, the free application for federal student aid. If you think JMU likes acronyms, federal government really likes acronyms, right? So you're going to see a lot of those things out there. Do we have any parents of seniors that are in here? Okay, a few of you, okay. So for what you can do right now, the biggest thing to do is to start with this FAFSA form. You can list several colleges on that form to receive information, and then that will basically get cast out to the different colleges so they can start working on some of the information there. Other colleges might use something, there's a CSS profile. You'll see that sometimes in some private schools that have those types of things. They may have a supplemental financial aid form, but for JMU and for most places, you have to do the FAFSA. Sometimes it's the only form that you have to do, so that's the case for JMU. It looks like the screen needs about another few inches, but I think everything is there that we need to see. So what you will find is for the college application, for the financial aid application, is every college and university will set a different priority deadline. Like the admissions applications, how everybody has different deadlines, people set up different deadlines for financial aid. One thing I wanted to note, I know a lot of people were taking pictures in the previous presentation. I'll get this email and this presentation out, email to everybody that's registered today, just so you have it, just to save your phones if you're deciding to delete my kids' homecoming pictures from my phone or financial aid. You know, I don't want there to be any conflict there. So every school will set a priority deadline for that, and for JMU, it's March 1, which is a little bit later than a lot of colleges. If you are a Virginia resident that's applying to Virginia schools, that priority deadline is going to be really important, because I'll talk a little bit about this. We have some state grant money that's given to us for in-state students. That money runs out, and so we go to those that have filled out their FAFSA form by that priority deadline. So that's why that priority deadline is going to be very important there. What happens is after you file that FAFSA form, the Department of Education sends you something back that's called the Student Aid Report, and this is basically just kind of gives you the information that they collected from you so that you can check it over if there's any changes or anything. It will also include on there an estimated family contribution, which we'll talk about in a second here. And then by listing JMU and listing all the colleges that you have listed on that FAFSA form, they will be able to give you a preliminary financial aid estimate. Sometimes this will come in the mail from certain colleges. We post that information online for students to be able to look into their portal system to kind of check that out. But that's a way that you can start looking at financial aid packages and maybe how some of that might compare with different institutions. One tidbit of advice that I would have for everyone in here is don't necessarily think about what the cost is right now. Every college will have different financial aid programs, different scholarship opportunities, different things like that might make one school a little bit more affordable than another. So go through the process, and some, even like private schools, you might see a huge price tag from the very beginning, but sometimes through scholarship opportunities and other things like that, it might come into more of a ballpark of what you're looking at. I always believe that you really need to look at the bottom line of how much you're going to have to pay out of pocket, because there's a lot of colleges that will play some games with numbers there, which I'll talk a little bit about as well. But you will get a preliminary award package. As we mentioned there, we have early action, which is non-binding, which you heard earlier. The schools that have early decision, that they call it early decision, that's the binding contract. That means that you're going to go to that school without even really knowing what the financial aid process looks like. We try to allow that for everybody, so that's really why we have an early action process, is so that you can work out the financial information, you can do all that, and figure that out just before May 1. If you want to pay your deposit right away and you say, hey, I got into JMU and school of music and I'm excited about that, you're welcome to do that, but we don't want to put that pressure on you initially once you get all the information in front of you before you make that decision. So you will get your decision, your financial aid preliminary package should come out shortly after our regular decision. So usually like in March time frame, you'll get your financial aid package from us. And then you have May 1, you have to submit your deposit. That's the national deadline to submit your deposit to which school that you want to go to. After, if you've paid your deposit to come to JMU or whichever college, there may be a process to just finalize that. So some students are selected for a verification process where you have to get copies of tax returns, things like that you'll use, just to verify that the information is correct. But that'll happen kind of over the summer. And then we'll also have some, the last thing there is submitting required accepted documents. So if you want to take out loans or anything like that, there's some documentation to complete for that as well. But pretty much right now, and for any parents of juniors, that application comes available October 1 of their senior year. So they have several months to get that. It's using 2 years ago's tax returns, if that makes sense, on how that works. So I mentioned our priority deadline was March 1, and that means that it should be at the federal processor by that time. So I would get in late February just to make sure everything goes through there. You can still complete the FAFSA a little bit after the priority deadlines, but keep in mind some of the aid programs that we receive a certain amount of money that's limited, that money can run out before we get to those late applicants. I mentioned about the importance of trying to meet it to get the top priority for any funding there, but it also allows you some time to get any kind of documentation out over the summer to make sure we have plenty of time so that they have the money right at the beginning of school. Professional judgment is something that any college or university has the rights to consider additional things other than what's on the financial aid application. The most common thing that you're going to see here is a job loss or unemployment. If one of the parents has lost their job or something like that, that is something that financial aid can take into account there. Also, extremely high medical bills, different things that are in there. Those are things that are not part of the financial aid application, but it's something that the colleges and universities will have an option to take a look at, and there's a process for it. If you feel like, hey, I need to let you know that one of the parents has lost their job, you can send an email to that financial aid at PJ, finaid_PJ@JMU, and they will collect any kind of documentation and work with you through that process. So, and again, I'm going to send all this out to you so you'll have all this direct information. Yes?
Is the FAFSA decision for financial aid considered in the scholarship offers? I know if it's a need-based scholarship.
If it is a need-based scholarship, that's what they're using. But talent-based, based on music audition, merit-based, it's just based on their GP and all that. It's not looking at FAFSA information at all, right? And things that cannot be factored into, things are, typical mortgage costs, credit card expenses. When I worked at financial aid, they're like, oh, well, I just bought a second house. And it's like, well, maybe you shouldn't have bought a second house. Maybe you should have, gotten your student into college. Think about that. So, in normal, it doesn't factor in some of those things or choices that you've made based on your financial aid doesn't, help you out in some personal choices sometimes, but it can help out if there's something beyond your control. And this is about how financial aid is packaged for you. So, a couple of things to keep in mind. Every college will come up with a cost of attendance. So this is how much money would it take for your student to function and live for that academic year. So they are, of course, factoring in the tuition fees and room and board expenses, but also that they're going to need money for books and supplies, transportation to get home, and things like that. Personal items, they're going to need shampoo, hopefully, they're going to clean themselves. And then there's also loan fees that come into a process that might be taken out of a loan. We put those back into it. So this is what every college is going to come up with a cost of attendance for how much that student would need to function for the year. And for an estimate for JMU, we have, for in-state students and out-of-state students, we have a 30,000, I'm sorry, this microphone thing is kind of blocking some of this, but again, you get it all. But what you're billed from the university is about $25,692 this year for in-state tuition and room and board, but we're factoring in about $5,100 of other things that students will need. So those other things are things that you can get financial aid for, that goes into that cost of attendance. Now, I mentioned that when you apply for financial aid, the government gives you something back called an estimated family contribution, the EFC that you hear of. Now, the only people that ever agree with what the EFC is those that say we can afford nothing. Everybody else usually is like, well, it says this, but I think we could, it's not accurate to us. But basically, every question that is asked on the financial aid application factors into that estimated family contribution. The age of the parents, that asks you what's the age of the oldest parent. So the older that you are as a parent, they're figuring out that you probably need to save some more for retirement, so you don't have as much to use for educational experience, educational expenses. And then there's, ask about number in the household and all those different things. And so they're factoring in all of that information to determine what they think the family could possibly contribute. And that includes the students. So if the student's been working, they're expecting some percentage of that to go to their college expenses as well. And then what will happen is, every college and university will take that cost of attendance and they will subtract that estimated family contribution, and then that is what each college will say is the student's need for that upcoming year. So that's that formula right there. Now, other things that you can use, of course, to help come up with costs for education, personal savings, investments. Some people have done 529s, different things like that. Payment plans, JMU, many other colleges will have a payment plan, so you can split the semester bills into monthly payments. We have an option for that. Of course, students who want to take part-time employment, scholarships that we talked a little bit about, and any kind of private loans. Typically, the federal loans that are offered are typically a little bit better interest rates, but you do have to apply for financial aid to get that process rolling. But there are private loans out there available for students and parents. Now this is types of non-scholarship financial aid available. So there are federal grants. The Pell Grant is, if you are eligible for the Pell Grant, typically at most colleges that number is not going to change. It's going to be the same amount of money that goes into every different institution that you're looking at. The FSEOG is a supplemental educational opportunity grant that is used. Sometimes there's a little bit more limited funding for that that's given to different colleges, so that might be a little discrepancy. And then there is state grant money, which is also free money that the state has given us to give to other in-state students. So that can come into two different programs. There's a VGAT program, and then there's a Commonwealth Award, the CA that's listed there. There also might be university grants, things that we are giving out as a grant, and then we'll talk about scholarships as well. And then there are those federal loans, which a student can take out in a student loan, and then there's also Parent Plus loans that are out there that you can use as parents to help come up with those expenses. And then there's also federal work-study programs. So those are basically jobs on campus. Different departments might have money set aside that falls under that federal work-study program, and students can apply for those jobs. So that's a need. Those are jobs held for students that do have financial needs. So some departments have those. To talk a little bit about loans, if you're thinking about loans and going down that route, these are the costs for different years, how much students can take out in their own names. For first year, it goes up a little bit. For second year and third and fourth year, have the same amount. And then there's these differences in what they call subsidized versus unsubsidized loans. Subsidized means there is financial need there. So basically the government is paying that interest while they are in school. Anything that is unsubsidized means that the student is responsible for that interest in school. They can either make payments on that while they're in school, or they can have it capitalized and add on to the principal loan once they graduate. But if they took the maximum amount for those years, it would come to about $27,000 if they were to take that amount out. What that would mean, I think it's always important to think about what does that mean after they graduate. They would be looking at right now, students who took out that much money would be paying close to $300 a month in student loan repayments, and that's how much extra, they're paying a little extra $7,000 on that interest if it was all unsubsidized. And that's based on the current interest rate of right around 5%, which is pretty low. There is also JMU specific aid. And when I mentioned federal work-study positions, those are ones that are held for students with financial need, but a lot of departments just have institutional employment. And those we don't put on the financial aid office, on the financial aid award letters, but those are basically jobs on campus that are held for anybody. Anybody who wants a job. And if your students are looking for a job on campus, they should be able to find one. We have about 3,000 different jobs on campus, so our students can find employment if they're looking for that, or off-campus employment as well. But you will see any kind of JMU scholarships will be on that financial aid award notice that we'll send out. Now, to talk a little bit about scholarships, I know there was we talked about the talent-based scholarships earlier that was based on the music audition that they may decide to award some students some scholarships. But there are also other scholarships that are awarded through JMU. And once a student, I know there were a lot of seniors in here, once a student applies to JMU, we give them something to set up called a My Madison account that they will have access to be able to first track how their application is going, but they'll also get access into a scholarship hub. And within that, that's where we will post all of these other different scholarship opportunities. Some things are automatically going to be considered for, and some of them they'll have to take an extra application to submit for that. Like we have alumni scholarships, we have some general merit-based scholarships, and some of those possibly could stack up on top of a talent-based scholarship. So something to keep in mind there. But we have all of these different programs that we award, that all of the information will be in that scholarship hub. So this is the big key point, just remember to check that out. And then we also, a lot of students bring in private scholarships into JMU, so this could be something from your community or something that you've applied for nationally. But I would suggest to look at scholarship opportunities. Your high school usually gets a lot of information that's sent into their school counseling office on different scholarship opportunities. So definitely check in on that. But there's also parent employers sometimes might offer scholarships. We could have things through churches. I always want to say the animal clubs, like the Elks Club, Lions Clubs, Badger, Wombat. I don't know how many of them there are out there, but a lot of those will award something to somebody in their community that's going to college. So definitely look at expand your options to include all those different possibilities. Now, how you're notified, of course, the university is going to, if you get a talent-based scholarship or you get anything from, across campus here, we're going to let the students know. And so you'll be hearing from the different departments here on campus if they're awarded any type of scholarship from that. And then we also process that information through the financial aid office so that it'll show up on financial aid notice. Sometimes it takes a little while to get that done. But that should be on their offer. And keep in mind, when you talk about the cost of attendance and financial need and all of those different things, scholarships do go into coming into those costs, and it does go into what the need is first. So you have a cost of attendance, but we rarely see a student that's going to say, hey, I got $40,000 worth of scholarships. Yeah, you can take all that money if you get all of that. But some of the things might reduce the amount of loans that you can take or something like that if you get a large scholarship. So just something to keep in mind. We're kind of held by that cost of attendance from anything that the university is offering. We will have a supplemental information sheet that you can submit back to the university if you get any outside scholarships that we need to know about. In fact, we need to do that. We have our premier merit-based scholarship is the Dingleton Scholarship here. There is some information on that for financial aid to be, from the university. You'll see that in the scholarship hub. There is an additional application process to do that, but that will cover tuition fees for 4 years on campus. There's not a lot of those, but we do have those merit-based scholarships, and they do require students to do early action at JMU to be considered for that. Part of that is they have an interview, and those interviews are in February for those. We also have these Madison Award for Academic Excellence. Again, this is another one of those JMU scholarships. It was pretty much 75% of in-state tuition and fees that we have there. The colleges are going to kind of use those. We're giving some to award merit-based to different students through that. So this is something else that we'll contact students about those. There's also a Centennial Scholars Program. This is merit and need-based. It is only for Virginia residents. But we have a Centennial Scholars Program that will cover full in-state tuition and fees and room and board for 4 years. We have about 50 students. The only requirement is students have to be Pell eligible. So when you submit your FAFSA form, you'll get something back to tell you if you're Pell eligible or not. If you're Pell eligible from that form, you're welcome to apply for those. And again, I'm going to send all of this out so you'll have this information with more of the nitty-gritty. And then we talked a little bit about private scholarships and how those different things can come into play. If you have questions for financial aid specifically, they do have an office here on campus. They are in the Student Success Center, which is, if you parked at the Mason Street parking deck, they're right across the street from that, up on the 5th floor. I think they're all gone into retreat, at least that's what they told me when they asked me to do the presentation. So I'm hoping that they're not there fully. I'm sure there's somebody answering questions at their desk. They have a phone number, and I will say our financial aid office, the people that work there are very personable, they're great, they're interested in helping you out. They want to help you work through this process as best as they can. So feel free to reach out. I know this process can be very confusing, and a lot of information that's out there, and a lot of special circumstances that might come up. So they're great resources. Does anybody else have any questions about anything? Yes?
It's general, regarding tuition, do you guys do something like the Ohio Guarantee where you lock it in for 4 years for tuition, or do you go up incrementally every year?
Yeah, so he was asking about do we have a locked-in tuition amount? Some schools are doing that. We do not, but I will say now in Virginia, the last time I looked with all of our Virginia colleges, and the community colleges are typically a little bit cheaper, but for all the Virginia colleges, I think we're the fourth or fifth cheapest on the list, and we typically the increase is typically very small with what we go up per year. I haven't seen it go over 5% in 15, 20 years. Sometimes they will lock it and say, we're not going to increase the tuition fees and all that stuff this year. But our Board of Visitors meets every April to kind of decide what the upcoming year's costs are going to be. But we really fight to keep those costs down as much as everybody. And when I talked about the bottom line, so especially for those that are going into the arts or music fields and things like that, and you're going to apply to a lot of different places. You're going to see a lot of different ticket prices that will come up there. And then there will also be some scholarship offers, hopefully, that will come along the way for you. Some colleges will play with fake money. And what I mean by that is kind of monopoly money. So they might say, well, we're going to charge $40,000 a year, but we know we're not going to charge people $40,000. We're going to almost take off $10,000 from everybody. So what happens is you might be looking at something and say, oh, well, this school offered me $10,000 scholarship. They must really want me. Well, it might not have been their intention to ever do that. They're playing little games with you there, but they still cost $30,000 at the end of the day. At JMU, we're a little more limited with some of our scholarship opportunities, but we try to keep our costs low as much as we can for everybody to kind of factor that in. There's been a lot of talks about trying to raise, but then offer some scholarships. So we don't want to play that game with everybody. We want to talk about, so any scholarships that we are awarding, it's real fundraised money that we have that we are awarding. Some donor has given for you there. So that's kind of just something to keep in mind because not every school, or you might come back and say, hey, well, this school offered me 10, can you offer me 10? We may not have the money to offer you that, but look at that bottom line with what it is. And that could come into play with other schools when you're looking into it. So just something to keep in mind when you're going through that process. Other questions? Yes?
Is there a range of scholarship funds that are talent-based in the music school?
Yeah, they have different pockets of money that they look at. So they have some that are awarded, but sometimes they might throw a different type of scholarship, but they'll from a different pool of funds there. But they have some money that they use within their department, as well as some that are going to be awarded, like the university says you have this number of scholarships to award. So, but again, you'll know all of that information shortly after the admission decisions go out, after they've gone through those auditions and things like that. They'll get that information out to you. Yes?
You have a slide about the bingo night, and you have to apply to the honors college for that. And then it said something about if there's only one selected, and then the rest of the people that made the semifinalists will be awarded some other scholarships. Is that the same one as the next slide?
Yes, that's the Madison Award for Academic Excellence. So everybody that's every student that is not awarded the Dingle Dean would be into that Madison Award for Academic Excellence.
You don't necessarily need to apply to the Dingle Dean to be considered
For the Madison Awards, yeah, they're going to be kind of more of an automated process. Right. Anything else? Yes?
Were there work study or additional work opportunities within that department?
Yeah, so we will have, like I said, there's about 3,000 jobs on campus. All of those get posted through our student employment branch that works within our financial aid office here at JMU. So basically, like any kind of classified ads in a way that they will post different types of positions that are out there, and then students will apply to that. And then they will, be interviewed and be selected for jobs through that. Some of them can be through the music department. Some of the students that are helping out with this event today are students that have been hired from the music department. But we have things all over campus, from our recreation center. I know I actually worked on campus in our financial aid office, which was great because it was kind of between the hours of 8 to 5, and it was in between classes and things like that I could fit that in. I still have my nights and weekends and things like that free. So you could find a lot of job opportunities through that. So, and typically a lot of those will be posted over the summer for students to look for that upcoming year. I think a lot of departments love to have students that are first-year students because we're like, hey, if we do a good job with them, we can keep them maybe for 4 years, if they want to do that. So, yeah. Other questions? Yes?
Mentioned to me by a friend who attended here that it's not just the audition or the grades, but we have to be looking on my daughter's resume, essentially. What comes into play with that, with the auditions and what she's done in the past and what the students have done in the past? How do you take it now? Is that a factor?
Are you talking about for scholarships? For scholarships? They're most of the scholarship determination from talent-based is gonna be based on that audition and how the faculty is interacting with them, what they know about them. That's where most of that will come into play. They have to upload a resume, and so they're definitely looking at that with their whole application process. That's something that they can upload with their slide room application, which is that additional application they'll do for the school music. Right, sure. Other questions? Okay, great. Well, oh yes, sir.
I can't help but to mention that you guys do have the Army and the Air Force ROTC programs.
Yes, we do have, we have an Army participation for ROTC through JMU, like we run those ROTC programs through us. We work with UVA's program for the Air Force ROTC. If there's anybody that's interested in going into ROTC, we have contacts that they can work with.
Well, I just mentioned it because they have scholarships.
Yes, and they do have healthy scholarships for that. If that's something that you're interested in doing, yes.
My oldest son went to JMU through the Air Force ROTC scholarship program at UVA, and it was amazing.
Oh, great, awesome.
Great experience.
But we arranged to get them there. So
Yeah. They didn't though. When he was here, he had to get himself there.
Okay, yeah, we work, and there's a lot of carpooling and stuff like that happens for that. Yeah. Yes, other questions? Okay. Well, great. Well, I don't have your full schedule in front of me, but maybe this is a time for a break or lunch or something like that. So feel free. We will have tables out there. I know they pumped up the muffins and coffee in the music building. Feel free to do that. But I hope everything's going well for your students for their auditions and side-by-sides today. So thanks so much.
Thank you.